Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, mirroring the knot of panic in my chest. Tomorrow, my freedom ended. Tied to an enigma. A woman carved from marble and silence. Known only for dismantling rival corporations. People whispered, Sloan Blackwood has no heart. But as we stood at the altar, our hands brushing, a booming frantic voice invaded my skull. Oh God, her hands are so soft. Don't sweat, Sloan. Breathe. Heavy velvet draped over my shoulders, stifling and utterly suffocating. My reflection in the full-length mirror offered no comfort. Tailored ivory fabric clung to my frame, a physical manifestation of the contract my father signed 3 months ago. The air in the dressing room smelled sharply of hairspray and wilting white lilies. Sickly sweet. Nauseating. Fingers trembling, I adjusted the stiff collar digging into my throat. Arranged marriages were archaic, yet here we were in the 21st century, trading omegas like corporate assets. Blackwood Industries needed a respectable public face to soften their ruthless image. Hartwell Pharmaceuticals needed an immediate bailout to avoid bankruptcy. A perfect, miserable transaction. Kira pushed open the heavy oak door. She didn't bother knocking. The sharp scent of her alpha pheromones, usually a comforting blend of pine and morning mist, was sour with stress. She leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, suit jacket off. Car is waiting downstairs. Her voice was flat. Don't look at me like that, I muttered, smoothing down a non-existent crease on my thigh. It's a signature. That's all. It's a life sentence, Alara. To an enigma. Enigmas. The apex predators of our secondary genders. They were rare, unstable, and deeply territorial. Most didn't integrate well into high society. Sloan Blackwood was the exception, but only because her wealth forced people to tolerate her. She was a phantom who communicated through lawyers and intimidating stares. In the 3 forced dinners we'd shared, she hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me. I'll survive, I said, grabbing my cuffs. The metal links clinked softly in the quiet room. Stepping out into the cathedral's vestibule, the sheer volume of the murmuring crowd bled through the heavy wooden doors. The organ began to play a low, vibrating hum that rattled my ribs. My father waited at the threshold. He offered an elbow. I didn't look at him as I took it. The doors swung open. A sea of faces turned. Camera shutters clicked in a frantic rhythm, ignoring the supposed sanctity of the venue. The scent in the room was overwhelming, a chaotic clash of expensive perfumes, nervous sweat, and sharp dominant alpha scents competing for space. At the end of the aisle stood Sloan Blackwood. Broad shoulders strained the seams of a bespoke charcoal suit jacket, tailored to fit her lean, powerful frame. Her posture was rigid, akin to a statue expecting a strike. Dark hair, the color of midnight oil, was swept back meticulously from a face that could have been carved by a sculptor who hated warmth. Jaw clenched tight enough to snap bone. Her eyes, striking, piercing silver, locked onto me. The air around her felt dense, heavy with the terrifying, petrified, and crushed cedar scent of an enigma. It was suffocating. Enough to make my knees threaten to buckle. We reached the altar. My father stepped away, a silent transaction complete. Sloan extended a hand. Her expression remained utterly blank. No smile, no greeting. Just a terrifying blank slate. Hesitantly, I raised my hand. My palm was slick with nervous sweat. I placed my hand in hers. Skin met skin. A violent crack echoed in my skull. It wasn't an external sound. It was an inward detonation. Pressure spiked behind my eyes, followed by a high-pitched ringing that drowned out the priest's opening words. I squeezed my eyes shut, swaying on my feet. Shit, she's shaking. Did I squeeze too hard? Let go, no, the cameras. God, she looks beautiful. Why does she look so sad? I'm ruining her life. My eyes snapped open. I stared at Sloan. Her mouth was closed in a firm, unyielding line. Her face was a mask of utter indifference. She's staring at me. She hates me. Obviously, she hates you, Sloan, you bought her. Keep breathing. 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Don't let your scent spike. The voice was deep, resonant, and panicked. It wasn't spoken out loud. It was echoing directly inside the walls of my brain. I jerked my hand back entirely, eyes wide. The priest paused mid-sentence. A murmur rippled through the front pews. Sloane's stony facade didn't slip, but her hand hung in the empty space between us. I knew it. I discussed her. Play it cool. Hands in pockets? No, that looks too casual. Down by the side. Fist. Clench the fist. I watched in real time as Sloane's large hand curled into a tight fist at her side. The knuckles turned white. She wasn't speaking. The cathedral was dead silent except for the priest clearing his throat. It was her. I was hearing her thoughts. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, choking me. I swallowed it down, forcing a cough instead. This had to be a stress-induced hallucination. A complete psychological break. That was the only logical explanation. I stepped forward again and deliberately reached out, grabbing her clenched fist. I forced her fingers open, lacing mine through hers. Her skin was rough, calloused, hands that worked, that built, that destroyed empires. The physical contact was grounding. Oh. The voice in my head exhaled a long, shuddering breath. She came back. She's holding my hand. Her fingers are freezing. I need to ask them to turn the AC down. Can I do that now? No. We're in the middle of the vows. Pay attention, Sloan. My mouth fell open slightly. I stared at her jawline, at the pulse jumping frantically beneath her collar. The feared Enigma of Blackwood Industries, the woman who supposedly gutted a tech startup without blinking last week, was currently having a silent panic attack over the room temperature. Do you, Sloan? The priest droned on. I do. Sloane's actual voice was a dark, gravelly rumble, utterly devoid of emotion. Too gruff. You sounded like a serial killer. Tone it down. Smile? No. A smile will look psychotic. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste iron. The sharp pain grounded me, but the voice didn't fade. When it was my turn, I whispered, I do, staring directly into her silver eyes. You may kiss. Sloan shifted closer. The scent of cedar grew stronger, but beneath the terrifying Enigma pheromones, I caught the faintest hint of something else. Burnt sugar. Anxiety. She leaned down. I braced myself for a rough claiming kiss. Just the cheek. Don't push her. Just the cheek. Her lips brushed the corner of my jaw. It was a featherlight touch, over in a fraction of a second. The cameras flashed blindingly. Soft. Like silk. Okay, pull away. You did it. You didn't ruin it. I stood frozen as she pulled back, her face returning to its impenetrable skull. My reality was fracturing. I was married to a monster who was internally a golden retriever with severe generalized anxiety. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden, sickly hue over the ballroom. Waitstaff moved like ghosts, balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that tasted like salted cardboard. The noise was a dull roar of networking and false congratulations. I sat rigidly at the head table. Sloan sat 2 feet away. The physical distance felt cavernous, yet my mind was impossibly crowded. As long as we weren't touching, the connection was muted, a low static hum at the base of my skull. But the moment her shoulder brushed mine when reaching for a water glass, the static snapped into sharp focus. She hasn't touched her food. Is the salmon dry? I should have insisted on the beef. But Omegas usually prefer lighter meals. Stupid. You're stereotyping. I stared down at the untouched fish on my plate. I wasn't hungry because my stomach was tied in knots, but out of sheer morbid curiosity, I picked up my fork and took a small bite. I chewed slowly, swallowing painfully. Sloane's arm rested near mine on the tablecloth. She ate it. Okay, good. Maybe she likes it. Should I offer her a roll? I turned my head slightly. Sloane was staring straight ahead, her profile sharp and unyielding, looking every bit the ruthless billionaire. A business rival from an opposing firm walked up to the table, offering a hand and a smarmy congratulatory smile. Sloane stood. Her presence instantly dominated the space. The rival alpha visibly shrank back, his scent turning sour. Blackwood, the man said, voice lacking its previous confidence. Quite the acquisition today. Sloane didn't shake his hand. She simply stared, her silver eyes flat and lifeless. The silence stretched until it became agonizingly uncomfortable. The rival swallowed hard, muttered an excuse, and practically fled. Sloane sat back down. Nailed it, asshole. Calling Alara an acquisition. I should have broken his fingers. No, violence is bad. Alara hates violence. She's looking at me. Did I look cool or just crazy? Probably crazy. I quickly averted my eyes, staring intensely at a floral arrangement. My chest tightened. It was a bizarre, jarring dissonance. The world saw a predator. I was getting a front row seat to a deeply insecure woman overthinking her own posture. The reception dragged. We survived the first dance, a stiff, awkward shuffle. She kept her hands lightly on my waist, terrified of holding too tight, while her internal monologue chanted a frantic, repetitive mantra. 1, 2, 3. Don't step on her shoes. 1, 2, 3. I had remained completely silent, my cynical defenses short-circuiting against the onslaught of her neurotic vulnerability. By the time we escaped into the waiting limousine, exhaustion had settled into my bones like lead. The car door shut, sealing us in the dim, soundproofed cabin. The engine purred. Rain streaked down the blacked-out windows, casting moving shadows across Sloane's face. She retreated to the far corner of the leather bench, putting as much space between us as physically possible. Silence. The static in my head dropped to a barely perceptible whisper. I loosened my tie, pulling the silk away from my bruised throat. The quiet should have been a relief, but it felt oppressive. I studied her in the gloom. She was staring out the window, her jaw muscles working. I casually slid across the slick leather seat until my thigh bumped against hers. She flinched, an infinitesimal tightening of her shoulders. The mental floodgates broke open. Why did she move closer? Is she uncomfortable? Is the heater blowing on her? God, I smell like stress. I'm choking her with my scent. I should roll down the window. No, it's raining. It's fine, I murmured, my voice raspy from disuse. Sloane whipped her head to look at me. Her eyes were wide for a fraction of a second before the heavy stoic mask slammed back into place. What is? She asked. Her voice was a harsh rumble. The temperature. It's fine. You don't need to roll down the window. She froze. Her breathing stopped. I didn't say anything about the window. Did I say that out loud? I definitely didn't open my mouth. Is she a psychic? No, don't be an idiot. You were looking at the controls. I just assumed. I lied smoothly, motioning toward the door panel. You were looking at the window controls. Sloane stared at me, her gaze intensely searching. She slowly dragged her eyes away, looking back at her lap. She's observant. Careful, Sloane. She's smart. You knew that. That's why you know. Don't think about it. You promised to keep your distance. A business arrangement. Protect her. Provide for her. Don't burden her with you. My breath caught. Protect me? Provide for me? The contract was a bailout. It was a power play. Blackwood Industries acquired a legacy name, and Hartwell Pharmaceuticals got cash. That was the reality my father had drilled into my head for months. What the hell was she talking about? I stared at the dark fabric of her trousers. I wanted to reach out, to grab her hand again, to dig deeper into the chaotic, contradictory mess of her mind. But the limousine turned sharply, pulling into the underground garage of Blackwood Tower. The ride was over. The real test was about to begin. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a penthouse that looked more like a modern art museum than a home. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, but the interior was stark. Polished concrete floors. Minimalist furniture in shades of gray and black. Not a single photograph. Not a single personal item. It smelled like sharp ozone and sterile lemon cleaner. Unlived in. My suitcase sat awkwardly in the center of the massive living room. Sloan stood near the kitchen island, taking off her suit jacket and draping it over a stool. The holsters of her dress shirt strained against broad shoulders. "Your room is down the hall. Last door on the left." She didn't look at me. She unfastened her cuff links. "It has an insert. I've instructed the staff to stock it with your preferred brands." I stood next to my bag, arms crossed. "My preferred brands?" She finally looked up. Her expression was guarded. "Your brother provided a list. She thinks it's creepy. I should have just let her buy her own stuff. I was trying to be helpful. I overstepped." I felt a strange, tight pinch in my chest. Cynicism was my armor, built up over years of being treated as a bargaining chip by my own family. I expected harshness. I expected dominance. I didn't know how to defend against awkward, over-prepared consideration. "Thank you," I said softly. She gave a curt nod. "I have early meetings. I'll be in the study. Don't wait up." She turned and walked away, disappearing down a different corridor. The heavy door of her study clicked shut, echoing in the vast empty space. I was alone. The static in my head was gone, replaced by the hum of the city far below. I dragged my suitcase into the assigned bedroom. It was massive, luxurious, and completely devoid of warmth. I unpacked mechanically, took a scalding shower to scrub the smell of the wetting off my skin, and pulled on soft, worn sweatpants. Hours passed. I lay in the massive king bed staring at the ceiling. The silence of the apartment was deafening. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the frantic, gentle voice of my terrifying wife. It was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. An enigma who built empires, yet panicked over a dry piece of salmon. Around 3 a.m., my throat felt like sandpaper. I slipped out of bed, opening the door quietly. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the ambient city lights spilling through the massive windows. I padded barefoot toward the kitchen. As I turned the corner, I stopped. Sloan was sitting on the floor by the glass wall, her back against a concrete pillar. She was out of her suit, wearing only a pair of dark athletic pants. Her knees were pulled up, arms resting on them. A half-empty glass of amber liquid dangled from her fingertips. In the dim light, she looked entirely stripped of her terrifying aura. She just looked tired. I took a step backward, intending to retreat to my room, but my heel caught the edge of a floor rug. I stumbled, my hip knocking against a side table. It made a loud, dull thud. Sloane's head snapped up. In a fraction of a second, she was on her feet. The glass hit the floor, not shattering, but rolling away. Her posture was instantly defensive, eyes scanning the shadows before locking onto me. I froze. The distance between us was maybe 10 feet. "I just wanted water," I rasped, rubbing my hip. She exhaled a long, harsh sound. She ran a hand through her hair, destroying the meticulous styling. "Glasses are in the left cabinet." I walked to the kitchen island, acutely aware of her eyes on me. I grabbed a glass, filled it from the tap, and drank. The chill of the water did little to soothe my nerves. I set the glass down and turned to face her. She was still standing near the window, a dark silhouette against the glowing skyline. I took a calculated risk. I walked toward her. As I closed the distance, the static in my head returned, ramping up like a radio dial being turned. Why is she coming over here? She should be sleeping. Did she have a nightmare? Is the bed uncomfortable? God, I shouldn't be out here. I look like a mess. I stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough to smell the whiskey on her breath, mixed with the ever-present cedar. Can't sleep? I asked. No. She crossed her arms over her chest. The muscles flexed instinctively. She was trying to look imposing, but the inner voice betrayed her completely. She's so close. She smells like the shower gel I picked. It smells better on her. Look at her eyes. Stop staring. Look at the wall. It's a big adjustment, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Being sold off. Sloan flinched. It was a violent, full-body flinch. She turned her head away sharply. Sold? She thinks she was sold. She thinks I bought her like property. I'm a monster. A deep, heavy sadness flooded across the mental link. It was so intense, so raw, that it physically ached in my own chest. I gasped softly, gripping the edge of the window frame. I didn't buy you, Sloan said. Her voice was strained, rougher than before. My father received $40 million today, I countered, my cynicism flaring as a defense mechanism against the overwhelming emotion bleeding into my mind. What do you call it? Sloan stepped closer. The sudden proximity made my breath hitch. She stopped just inches away. I had to tilt my head up to look at her. Her jaw was tight, her eyes burning with an intensity that terrified me. But the voice in my head was practically weeping. Tell her. Tell her you've watched her for 2 years. Tell her you bailed her father out just to get her out of that toxic house. Tell her you would have given them $100 million for nothing just to keep her safe. You can't. She'll think you're a stalker. She'll hate you more. My pulse pounded in my ears. The world tilted on its axis. 2 years. I stared up at this terrifying silent woman. The puzzle pieces violently rearranged themselves. The contract. The lack of demands. The meticulously stocked bathroom. It wasn't a corporate merger. It was a rescue mission. Executed by a woman who didn't know how to communicate in anything other than boardroom acquisitions. My voice failed me. I swallowed hard, the rawness in my throat returning. You bailed him out. It was a sound investment, Sloan said flatly. The lie was so unconvincing it was almost laughable. Please don't cry. She looks like she's going to cry. I broke her. I ruined it on the first night. I wasn't going to cry. I was angry. I was terrified. But mostly, I was completely unmoored. I reached out. My fingers pressed flat against her chest, right over her heart. It was beating frantically against my palm. You're a terrible liar, Sloan, I whispered. She looked down at my hand, then back up to my face. Her mask cracked, just a hairline fracture. But her eyes softened, revealing a depth of exhausted devotion that made my chest cave in. She touched me. She's touching my chest. Keep breathing. Don't scare her away. I didn't pull away. The city lights blurred outside the window. This woman was dangerous to the world, an apex predator draped in tailored suits. But to me, she was a fortress built entirely of glass. And I was holding a hammer. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had completely inverted. And as her heartbeat thundered against my palm, I realized with terrifying clarity that I didn't want to break her. I wanted to understand her. Morning sunlight bleached the concrete floor of the penthouse into a sterile, blinding white. I woke up with a stiff neck and a mouth that tasted like old copper. The events of the previous night felt like a fever dream. Telepathy. A ruthless Enigma secretly playing White Knight. It was absurd. I scrubbed my face. The rough cotton of my sweatpants offered the only grounding sensation in the alien room. I followed the sharp, bitter scent of espresso down the hall. Sloan was in the kitchen, fully dressed in a crisp navy button-down and tailored slacks. Her hair was impeccably styled again. The vulnerable woman from 3 a.m. was buried beneath a layer of expensive armor. She was typing methodically on a tablet, a steaming mug sitting ignored on the marble counter next to her elbow. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. She didn't look up, but her jaw visibly tightened. She knew I was there. The static hummed at the base of my skull, a low-frequency vibration. There is coffee. Pastries are in the white box from the bakery on 4th. I was informed you like the almond croissants. Please eat something. She looks too thin. Her father never let her eat proper sugar. I bought 6. Is 6 too many? It looks psychotic. I pushed off the frame and walked to the counter. I opened the box. 6 perfectly dusted, golden brown croissants sat in neat rows. A cynical, bitter laugh caught in my chest. My father used to monitor my caloric intake to ensure I maintained a desirable figure for potential suitors. Sloan had bought me a bakery's worth of butter and sugar because she was worried. I picked one up, intentionally letting my elbow brush hers as I reached for a mug. The static snapped into sharp, high-definition audio. She took one. Okay, good. She smells like sleep. Warm. Don't look at her, you'll stare. Read the quarterly report. Focus, Sloan. So, I mumbled through a bite of flaky pastry, wiping a crumb from my lip. 2 years. Sloan's fingers stopped moving on the tablet. The screen timed out and went dark. She didn't look at me, but the muscles in her neck strained. She remembers. Of course she remembers. She's not an idiot. Abort. Deny it. Tell her she misheard you. Tell her she was drunk. I wasn't drunk, Sloan, I said softly, tracing the rim of my ceramic mug. She whipped her head toward me. Silver eyes wide. A flash of genuine terror breaking through her stoic facade. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. I took a sip of the espresso. It was scalding, burning a welcome path of reality down my throat. I set the mug down and stepped directly into her personal space. The scent of crushed cedar spiked, heavy and defensive. But beneath it was the frantic, burnt sugar smell of pure anxiety. I reached out and pressed my palm flat against her chest, right where the navy cotton stretched over her heart. She froze entirely. Stopped breathing. She's a telepath. Or I'm losing my mind. Am I speaking out loud? She's touching me. God, her hand is warm. Look at her eyes. They're bruised underneath. She didn't sleep. I'm not a telepath, I answered her internal panic, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. But when I touch you, I hear you. Everything. The anxiety, the overthinking, the fact that you apparently bought me to save me. Sloan stared at me. The silence stretched so tight I thought it might snap and take my head off. She looked down at my hand on her chest and slowly brought her own massive, calloused hand up, wrapping her fingers around my wrist. Her grip was firm but incredibly careful. Not restraining. Just holding. You hear me? She finally spoke. Her voice was a harsh, scraping gravel. Loud and clear. This is a nightmare. She knows I'm pathetic. She knows I'm not what they say. She's going to leave. The contract has an opt-out after 6 months. She's going to use it. I dug my fingertips slightly into her shirt. I'm not leaving, Sloan. She closed her eyes. A shudder ran through her massive frame, completely betraying the terrifying reputation of the Blackwood Enigma. When she opened her eyes, the silver was stormy, swirling with an emotion so intense it made my breath hitch. Your father, Sloan said out loud, her voice dropping an octave, was arranging to sell your contract to an alpha in Chicago. A woman with a documented history of domestic abuse settlements swept under the rug. I saw the paperwork crossing a broker's desk. She swallowed hard. Her thumb stroked the inside of my wrist, a completely unconscious, soothing gesture. I couldn't allow it. The words were forced out through a tight jaw. So I made a counteroffer your father couldn't refuse. A financial bailout and a merger. I sound like a corporate sociopath. Tell her you care. Tell her you watched her feed stray cats in the alley behind her father's estate. Tell her her smile is the only thing that makes sense. No, that's creepy. Shut up. My cynical heart, hardened by 24 years of neglect, cracked right down the middle. I pulled my wrist from her grasp, ignoring her immediate internal surge of panic, and wrapped both my arms around her waist, pressing my face into the hard lines of her chest. Oh, she's hugging me. What do I do with my hands? Back? Waist? Shoulders? Gently, Sloan. Don't break her. Large, heavy hands settled awkwardly between my shoulder blades. The pressure featherlight. We stood there in the sterile kitchen. An enigma who commanded empires, terrified of holding me too tight. And an Omega who had sworn never to trust an Alpha, entirely anchored by her chaotic mind. 3 days later, the fragile, unspoken truce we had built in the quiet of the penthouse was dragged into the harsh, glaring lights of the charity gala season. The dress code was white tie. My suit was a deep midnight blue velvet that cost more than my first car. It felt like heavy armor. Yet, standing next to Sloan in the grand foyer of the museum, I felt entirely exposed. The air was a suffocating soup of expensive perfumes and aggressive, dominating alpha scents competing for dominance. My chest felt tight. The noise, the clinking glasses, the forced laughter, the classical quartet fighting a losing battle against the crowd, scraped against my nerves. Sloan stood beside me, a towering monument in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. She was in her element here, or so it seemed. Her face was an impenetrable mask of cold indifference. Women and men parted around her like water hitting a stone. She emanated absolute, terrifying control. But I had my fingers lightly hooked through the crook of her elbow. Too crowded. The air conditioning is inadequate. Alara is sweating. Is she claustrophobic? I should find a balcony. That alpha by the pillar is staring at her. If she looks at Alara's waist again, I'm going to rip her optic nerve out. No. Breathe. Philanthropy. We are doing philanthropy. I hid a smirk behind my champagne flute. The cognitive dissonance was intoxicating. Having fun, I murmured, leaning closer to her shoulder. Sloan looked down at me, her expression flat. It is a necessary obligation. She looks beautiful in the velvet. I want to take her home. I want to lock the door. No, bad Enigma. Don't be possessive. Let her shine. Before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Sloan. And the new acquisition. I stiffened. The voice was slick, coated in false charm. I turned to see Julian, an alpha, heir to a shipping conglomerate, and a notorious predator in socialite circles. She was holding a scotch, her eyes raking over me with a blatant, insulting hunger. Her scent was overpowering, a rancid mix of musk and rotting citrus, intended to submit an Omega on the spot. My stomach churned. I took a half step back. My cynical defenses instantly erecting walls. I was used to this. I was used to being looked at like a prime cut of meat. Sloan didn't move. But the air around her dropped 10 degrees. The subtle background scent of cedar and rain suddenly, violently sharpened into a suffocating, terrifying ozone. It was the scent of a storm about to break. Step away, Julian. Step away, Julian, Sloan said. Her voice was quiet, barely a rumble. But it carried a lethal physical weight. Julian chuckled, though it sounded strained. The oppressive weight of Sloane's Enigma pheromones was actively pushing her back. Just saying hello, Blackwood. Don't be so territorial. She's out in public now, isn't she? Julian reached out as if to pat my shoulder. Sloane's hand snapped out like a viper. She caught Julian's wrist in midair. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She simply squeezed. I heard the faint, sickening sound of bone grinding against bone. Julian's face drained of color. She let out a choked, breathless gasp. I tightened my grip on Sloane's elbow. The mental link exploded into a deafening roar. Touch her again, and I will break every bone in your arm. I will tear your throat out with my teeth. She is mine. You do not look at her. You do not breathe her air. The pure, unadulterated primal violence in her thoughts made my knees weak. But it wasn't fear that coursed through me. It was a dark, twisting thrill. She wasn't just protective. She was feral for me. I slid my hand down her arm, deliberately lacing my fingers through her free hand. "Sloan," I said softly. My voice was calm, a stark contrast to the violence in her head. "I'm tired of the noise. Can we go to the balcony?" Sloan froze. Her silver eyes flicked from Julian's pale, terrified face down to our joined hands. She's holding my hand. She's not scared of me. She wants to leave. Okay, let her go. Let the trash go. Focus on Alara. The suffocating pressure of her scent instantly vanished, returning to the comforting, heavy cedar. She released Julian's wrist. The alpha staggered back, cradling her arm against her chest, completely humiliated, and bolted into the crowd. Without another word, Sloan turned her back on the room, pulling me gently through the double doors onto the stone balcony. The cool night air hit my face, immediately clearing the nausea from my stomach. I dropped her hand, walking to the edge of the balustrade to look out over the city lights. The silence behind me was heavy. I waited. "I apologize," Sloan finally said. Her voice was stiff, formal. My reaction was inappropriate for the setting. I turned around. She was standing a few feet away, her hands clasped behind her back, looking like a woman awaiting execution. The terrifying predator from 5 minutes ago was gone. I stepped forward, closing the distance until my chest brushed against her tuxedo jacket. I reached up and flattened my hands against her lapels, feeling the frantic, hammering pulse beneath the layers of wool and cotton. I scared her. She thinks I'm a monster. I lost control of my scent. I failed. "You didn't scare me," I whispered, looking up into her stormy eyes. I dragged my thumb along the sharp line of her jaw. "But if you ever call me an acquisition again, I'll let you break her other arm." Sloane's breath hitched. A slow, hesitant warmth bled through the mental link, wrapping around my mind like a heavy protective blanket. She didn't smile. But she leaned down, pressing her forehead against mine, anchoring us both in the quiet dark. Tuesday dragged the apartment into a suffocating, heavy humidity that had nothing to do with the weather outside. For 3 days, the sterile penthouse had been slowly filling with an oppressive, thick scent. Crushed cedar and damp earth, heavily laced with the acrid sting of burning wood. Sloan was avoiding me. She left before I woke. She returned long after I went to bed. The only proof she still lived here was the lingering, choking density of her Enigma pheromones and the increasingly unhinged, brief bursts of static I caught if I brushed past a jacket she had just taken off. My cynical survival instincts, honed from years in a house where silence meant danger, were screaming at me to lock my door. Enigmas were notoriously unstable during their ruts. They were possessive, violent, and prone to losing their humanity entirely. But every time I locked my bedroom door, my hand hovered over the deadbolt, my mind flashing back to the exhausted woman sitting on the floor at 3 a.m. Around midnight, the quiet of the apartment shattered. A loud, heavy crash echoed from the east wing, Sloane's private study. I threw off the duvet, my bare feet hitting the polished concrete. The air in the hallway was so thick it was physically difficult to breathe. It felt like walking through hot syrup. My own Omega biology rebelled, my knees threatening to buckle under the sheer dominance of the scent. But I forced myself forward. The heavy oak door to the study was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was dark, save for the blue glow of a scattered tablet on the floor. Books were swept off the mahogany desk. And in the corner, pressed back against the dark wood paneling, was Sloan. She had stripped off her suit jacket and tie. Her dress shirt was unbuttoned halfway down her chest, clinging to her skin with heavy sweat. Her chest heaved with ragged, uneven breaths. She looked up as the door creaked. Her eyes weren't the stormy silver I had grown accustomed to. The pupils were completely blown out, turning her irises into pitch-black voids. A low, guttural growl vibrated in her throat. It was a terrifying, entirely animalistic sound. "Get out," she snarled. The gravelly voice was gone, replaced by a raw, scraping edge. I didn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs loud enough that I was certain she could hear it. I stepped over a fallen book, the spine crunching slightly under my heel. "Sloan, get out." She violently shoved a leather armchair away. It tipped backward, crashing onto the rug. She squeezed her eyes shut, gripping her own hair. I closed the distance between us. The heat rolling off her body was practically radioactive. I didn't hesitate. I reached out and grabbed her forearms, digging my fingers into the rigid, bunched muscles beneath her damp sleeves. The mental link hit me like a freight train. Run. Please, God, run away. I'm going to hurt her. I can't stop it. It burns. Everything burns. She smells like vanilla and salt. I want a bite. I want to ruin. I'm a monster. Alara, please get out before I tear you apart. The thoughts weren't formed in complete sentences. They were fragmented, frantic bursts of primal agony and sheer terror. She was fighting her own biology with everything she had, tearing her own mind apart just to keep her hands off me. "You're not a monster," I gasped, the sheer volume of her internal panic making my head spin. I slid my hands up her arms, gripping her broad shoulders. Sloane's eyes snapped open. The black voids locked onto my face. Her large hands shot out, gripping my waist. Her fingers dug into my hips with bruising force. She dragged me flush against her chest. The impact knocked the breath out of my lungs. She buried her face in the crook of my neck, right over my scent gland. She inhaled, a ragged, desperate sound. Her teeth grazed the sensitive skin there. Bite. Claim. Mine. Break her open. No. Stop, Sloan. Don't ruin her. She trusts you. Push her away. Her hands immediately spasmed, trying to push me backward. But I wrapped my arms tightly around her neck, anchoring myself to her. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. But I was so profoundly tired of being afraid of the people who were supposed to care for me. "Stop fighting it," I whispered fiercely into her ear, my voice trembling. "Stop fighting me." She froze. She's shaking. She's terrified. "You're terrifying her. Let her go." "I'm shaking because you're crushing my ribs, you idiot. Not because I'm scared of you." I gritted out, deliberately dragging my nails lightly down her nape. A sharp, violent shudder wrecked her massive frame. The guttural growl in her chest shifted, softening into a low, vibrating hum that rattled against my breastbone. She didn't push me away this time. Instead, her grip shifted, one hand supporting the small of my back, the other tangling in my hair, holding me with a terrifyingly fragile reverence. She stayed. "She's not running. Please don't let me hurt her." "You won't," I answered the desperate echo in my mind. I pressed my mouth against her jawline, tasting salt and sweat. "You won't." The storm broke. The terrifying Enigma, the apex predator of the corporate world, sank to her knees on the Persian rug, burying her face in my stomach. Her heavy arms wrapped around my thighs as she finally, completely surrendered to the fever. Porcelain clinked sharply against glass. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, peaceful shadows across the kitchen island. The oppressive weight of the past 3 days had completely evaporated, replaced by a quiet, exhausted domesticity. My throat was slightly bruised. My muscles ached with a deep, heavy lethargy. But the ever-present cynical knot in my chest, the one I had carried since childhood, was remarkably loose. Sloan stood by the stove, flipping an omelette. She was wearing gray sweatpants and nothing else. Faint, crescent moon-shaped scratches marked her heavy shoulders. She looked utterly relaxed. The rigid, statuesque posture gone. The private elevator chime shattered the quiet. Sloan stiffened. She hadn't buzzed anyone up. I pulled my oversized sweater tighter around my shoulders, instantly on edge. The heavy steel doors slid open. Stepping into the penthouse was a woman entirely carved from ice. She wore a tailored crimson pantsuit that probably cost more than my father's entire pharmaceutical bailout. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, unforgiving twist. The scent of sharp gin and expensive metallic powder immediately invaded the room, attempting to dominate the space. Beatrice Blackwood. Sloan's mother. The architect behind the Blackwood Empire. And the woman who had famously sued her own husband into bankruptcy before he died. She didn't look at me. Her cold, piercing eyes locked onto Sloan's bare back. 3 days, Sloan. Beatrice's voice was perfectly modulated, lacking any warmth. You missed the acquisition meeting for the Vanguard tech firm. The board is restless. Sloan slowly set the spatula down. She turned around. In an instant, the relaxed, vulnerable woman from the stove vanished. Her posture went rigid. Her face slammed shut, becoming the terrifying, blank mask she wore for the press. She was the Enigma again. The merger was already finalized, Mother. My presence was a formality. Her voice was a flat, dead rumble. Beatrice finally turned her gaze to me. She looked at me the way one might look at a stain on a designer rug. Her eyes slowly catalogued my messy hair, the oversized sweater, and the faint bruising on my neck. A perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. I see the distraction was severe. She noted dryly. I told you, Sloan. Indulging in these rescue complexes is bad for business. PR marriage is one thing. Losing 3 days of productivity over a mediocre Omega who will undoubtedly demand half your assets in a year is pathetic. My face flushed hot. The old, familiar sting of being reduced to a transaction hit me square in the chest. I gripped my coffee mug, my knuckles turning white. I glanced at Sloan. She stood completely still, staring at her mother. She didn't defend me. She didn't speak. She just stood there, looking like the cold, ruthless bastard the world thought she was. Doubt, sharp and ugly, twisted in my gut. Had the last 3 days just been a biological fluke? Under the table, I extended my leg. My bare foot brushed against her calf. The static roared to life, nearly deafening me. I will dismantle her holding company. I will strip her board seats by Friday. How dare she speak to her like that? I want to throw her through the reinforced glass. Look at Alara's face. She hurt her. I am going to end her entire corporate existence. Keep your face blank, Sloan. Do not let her see she has leverage. I almost choked on my coffee. The sheer violence of her internal defense was a staggering contrast to her icy exterior. She wasn't ignoring her mother's insult. She was actively plotting her financial assassination in real time. Completely terrified that showing any outward emotion would give Beatrice a weapon to use against me. A slow, sharp smile spread across my face. The doubt vanished, replaced by a heady, dangerous rush of power. She was a monster to everyone else, but her teeth were bared solely in my defense. I set my mug down with a loud, deliberate thud. Actually, Beatrice. My voice was smooth, dripping with the arrogant, cynical charm my father had trained into me for high society events. I find her productivity to be exceptional. And as for her assets, I prefer the ones currently on display. I gestured lazily toward Sloane's bare, scratched chest. Beatrice's jaw actually dropped. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. Clearly, no one had ever spoken to her like that in her life. Oh my God, she is magnificent. She looks like she swallowed a lemon. I am so in love with her it hurts. Did she just compliment my chest? I need to do more push-ups. I had to bite the inside of my cheek violently to stop myself from laughing out loud at her internal monologue. Excuse me? Beatrice snapped, recovering her composure, her scent spiking aggressively. You're excused. I replied calmly, leaning back in my stool. The elevator is behind you. Sloan and I were having breakfast. If the board is restless, tell them to take a sedative. Beatrice looked at Sloan, expecting her to reprimand me. Expecting the ruthless alpha to put her Omega in line. Sloan simply picked up her coffee mug. Her face completely impassive. You heard my wife, Mother. We are busy. Please leave. Please leave so I can kiss her. She is a vicious, beautiful menace. I am going to buy her an island. Beatrice's face mottled with rage. She stared at us for 3 agonizing seconds before spinning on her heel. The heavy silk of her suit swished as she marched back into the elevator, hammering the button. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sharp scent of gin. The quiet returned. I looked at Sloan. She was staring at me. The ice in her eyes completely melted. She set her mug down, walked around the kitchen island, and pulled me off the stool. She didn't say a word. She just buried her face in my neck, right over the bruised scent gland, and breathed me in. Her mind echoed warmly against mine. My brilliant, terrifying girl. Heavy rain drummed a relentless, chaotic rhythm against the reinforced glass of the study. Thunder rattled the floorboards, a deep, resonant vibration that settled in my teeth. The penthouse was otherwise entirely silent. Sloan was running a board meeting downtown, dismantling her mother's corporate influence piece by surgical piece. Left alone, my restless energy had driven me to hunt for a simple charging cable. Instead, my fingers brushed against a thick, textured manila envelope hidden beneath a stack of ledgers in the bottom drawer of her mahogany desk. Curiosity, fueled by years of deeply ingrained paranoia, overruled respect for her privacy. My thumb popped the metal clasp. The scent of aged paper and sharp, bitter printer ink wafted up, instantly souring my stomach. It was the marriage contract. Thick, heavy parchment detailed my exact monetary value. Signatures at the bottom, stark and black. My father's messy scrawl. Sloan's precise, razor-sharp script. Flipping past the financial jargon, a specific clause highlighted in faint yellow caught my eye. Section 4, paragraph B. The option of dissolution. My eyes scanned the legalese. The words blurring together until the core meaning violently snapped into focus. Either party retained the right to terminate the arrangement without financial penalty exactly 6 months from the date of signing. Complete nullification. A built-in expiration date. A hollow, sinking ache cracked my ribs open. My cynical armor, which had been slowly melting away under Sloan's frantic, unspoken devotion, instantly hardened back into ice. Of course there was an exit strategy. Billionaires didn't make permanent investments in damaged, cynical Omegas without an escape hatch. The tenderness, the protective rage against her mother, the agonizing vulnerability during her rut, maybe it was all just temporary. A passing fascination for an Enigma who didn't know how to interact with the real world. The heavy study doors clicked open. Her scent hit the room before she did. Rainwater, ozone, and crushed cedar. Sloan stepped inside, shaking droplets from her dark overcoat. She froze halfway across the Persian rug. Her silver eyes locked onto the papers trembling in my hands. The heavy, oppressive scent of her Enigma pheromones violently spiked, flooding the room with the smell of burnt sugar and sheer, unadulterated panic. She found it. Oh God, she's reading the termination clause. She looks sick. Her scent is completely sour. I ruined it. She thinks it's a countdown. Say something, Sloan. Speak. You kept the receipt. My voice cracked, harsh and defensive. I tossed the heavy pages onto the desk. They slid across the polished wood, coming to rest against a brass lamp. Sloan didn't take off her coat. She closed the distance between us in 3 massive strides, bypassing the desk entirely. She stopped mere inches away, close enough that the dampness of her wool coat seeped into my thin sweater. Alara. Her actual voice was a low, rough scrape. She reached out, her massive hands hovering over my shoulders. Terrifyingly unsure if she was allowed to touch me, I took a half step back. The movement was involuntary. A flinch, born from a lifetime of being entirely disposable. The mental link shrieked. She stepped away. She's pulling back. She hates me. Explain the clause. Tell her why you put it there. You coward. Open your mouth. 6 months. I snapped, crossing my arms tightly over my chest, trying to hold my fracturing reality together. Was that the trial period? If I didn't smile pretty enough for the cameras, you could just send me back to my father. Sloan flinched as if I had physically struck her. Her jaw clenched so tight the muscles leaped beneath her skin. She lunged past me, not toward the door, but toward the desk. She grabbed the thick stack of parchment in one hand. Her knuckles turned bone white. I wrote that clause into the contract, Sloan growled, turning back to face me. Her chest heaving. Because I knew my reputation. I knew what people said about me. A ruthless, unfeeling monster in a suit. She took a step closer, the papers crinkling violently in her grip. Her eyes were wide, swirling with a desperate, stormy intensity. I bought your debt because it was the only way to get you out of that house without your father selling you to someone worse. But I never intended to trap you in a cage with me. My breath caught in my throat. Tell her the truth. Let her see how pathetic you are. The 6 months, Sloan continued, her voice breaking slightly on the final word, was for you. And out. If I terrified you, if you couldn't stand the sight of me, you could walk away with your freedom. And enough capital to ensure your father could never touch you again. The room spun. The harsh, bitter cynicism that had defined my entire existence felt entirely useless, dissolving into nothing. I stared at this terrifying titan of industry, a woman who could destroy financial empires with a phone call, standing in her wet overcoat, offering me the keys to my own cage. Sloan looked down at the contract in her hand. Disgust rippled across her features. With a sudden, violent motion, she grabbed the top of the parchment with her other hand and ripped. The thick paper tore with a loud, vicious shriek. She ripped it again and again, destroying the signatures, the clauses, the financial jargon, until nothing remained but worthless confetti. She let the pieces fall to the floor, littering the expensive rug. There is no trial period, Sloan stated, her chest rising and falling heavily. There is no exit strategy, unless you want one. If you want to leave, Alara, the door is open. I will fund whatever life you choose. But do not ever think I view you as temporary. Silence rushed back into the room, deafening and absolute. I looked at the torn paper on the floor, then up at her exhausted, terrified face. My vision blurred. A single tear, hot and unbidden, slipped down my cheek, tracing a path to my jaw. She's crying. I made her cry. I broke her heart. You absolute idiot. I'm the idiot? I whispered, uncrossing my arms. I stepped into her space, completely ignoring the damp wool of her coat, and reached up to grip her face. My thumbs pressed roughly into her cheekbones. Why would I ever leave the only person who actually listens to me? Sloan let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Her heavy arms wrapped around my waist, lifting my feet entirely off the floor. She buried her face in my neck, right against my pulse point. Her scent instantly shifted from burnt sugar to a profound, overwhelming wave of rain-soaked cedar and pure, unadulterated relief. Autumn bled into winter, turning the city skyline outside our windows into a glittering, frost-covered grid. The sterile penthouse had slowly transformed. Throw blankets draped over the minimalist furniture. A chaotic array of novels I was reading piled up on the marble coffee table. The air constantly smelled like a comforting, heavy mix of cedar, rain, and the sweet vanilla salt of my own scent. We had learned to navigate the noise. The telepathic link, the bizarre, impossible symptom of an enigma finding her true mate, hadn't faded. But it had changed. It was no longer a frantic, deafening roar of panic. It had become a low, constant hum, a symphony of her mundane, daily devotion that played exclusively for me. Late on a Tuesday evening, the apartment was dimly lit by a single floor lamp. Rain lashed against the glass, an exact mirror of the night I had discovered the contract. But the atmosphere inside couldn't have been more different. Sloan was sitting on the large, deep sofa, wearing her usual soft gray sweatpants and a faded black t-shirt. I was sprawled across her lap sideways, my legs dangling over the armrest, my head resting on her broad chest. The rhythmic thud of her heartbeat vibrated against my ear. She had a thick hardcover book in one hand, while her other hand absently played with the ends of my hair. The static at the base of my skull was a gentle, warm vibration. Her hair is getting long. It curls at the nape of her neck when it's damp. I should ask if she wants to go to that salon downtown. No, she hates people touching her. Maybe I could learn to cut it. I'd probably snip her ear off. Bad idea, Sloan. A soft, genuine laugh bubbled up in my chest. I tilted my head back to look up at her sharp jawline. You are absolutely not coming near my head with scissors, I murmured, shifting my weight against her. Sloan didn't jump. She didn't panic. The startled fear that used to accompany my answers to her unspoken thoughts was entirely gone. She merely lowered the book, her silver eyes looking down at me, soft and incredibly fond. It was just a thought, she replied, her low rumble vibrating through my ribs. A practical thought. I am very dexterous. I dismantle engines for fun. Hair cannot be that difficult. She just doesn't trust my artistic vision. I smirked, tracing idle circles over her sternum through the soft cotton of her shirt. Your artistic vision consists entirely of grayscale and minimalism. I'd end up looking like a concrete block. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It was a rare, beautiful expression that the press had never managed to capture. She shifted her grip, her large fingers gently massaging my scalp. The sensation sent a heavy, lethargic wave of comfort through my limbs. She's purring. She doesn't realize she's doing it, but her chest is vibrating. She smells like sleep. I want to freeze this exact second and live in it for the next 60 years. Is the room too chilly? Her feet are bare. Before she could even twitch to reach for the throw blanket folded on the back of the sofa, I reached up and pressed my palm flat against her cheek, halting her movement. I'm perfectly warm, I said softly. She leaned into my touch, turning her head slightly to press a kiss into my palm. The rough scrape of her stubble grounded me perfectly in the present. My cynical armor, the defensive walls built over 2 decades of feeling like a piece of inventory in my father's warehouse, were completely gone. Demolished and swept away by a woman the world thought was a monster. They called her an enigma because they couldn't understand her silence. They didn't realize her silence was just a container for a mind entirely consumed by how to protect, provide, and care for the people she deemed her own. I wasn't a corporate acquisition. I wasn't a bailout. I was simply a woman listening to the chaotic, beautiful thoughts of her wife, perfectly content to never experience true silence ever again. Sloan set the book on the side table. She shifted her arms, pulling me fully up her chest until we were eye level. She buried her face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. Her heavy sigh sent a shiver down my spine. Mine. Safe. Home. The words echoed in my mind, not spoken out loud, but ringing with an absolute, unshakable truth. I wrapped my arms around her broad shoulders, holding her just as tightly, finally answering the echo with a certainty I had never known before. Yours. Extra story. I can hear the thoughts of my cold enigma arranged wife. I couldn't believe my ears. 1 month later. The penthouse had never smelled like cinnamon before Sloan. I realized this as I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold concrete floors, watching a woman who had once been described as the most terrifying force in corporate litigation stare down a bag of fresh cranberries like they had personally insulted her family line. She was wearing an oversized cream sweater, my sweater, actually, the one she had stolen from my suitcase 3 weeks ago and never returned, and her dark hair was loose, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She looked nothing like the marble statue from the altar. She looked soft, human, mine. The thought sent a warm flush through my chest. Alara. Her voice was flat, controlled. These berries are aggressive. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Aggressive how? She held one up between her thumb and forefinger, examining it with the same cold intensity she usually reserved for hostile takeover negotiations. They are red. Aggressively red. And they make a sound when you squeeze them. A wet sound. I do not like the sound. Oh God, it popped. It actually popped. Is it supposed to pop? Did I break it? She's going to think I can't cook. I can't cook. Why did I say I could cook? I should have just ordered from the restaurant. No, she wanted homemade. She said homemade was intimate. Intimate means stop thinking about what intimate means, Sloan, you'll panic. I walked over, pressing myself against her back and wrapping my arms around her waist. She went rigid for exactly half a second, an old habit, before melting into me with a quiet exhale. You don't have to cook, I murmured against her shoulder blade. I was joking when I said I wanted a traditional Thanksgiving. She wasn't joking. I saw her face when she mentioned it. Her eyes did the thing. The soft thing. The thing that makes my chest hurt. It's fine, Sloan said out loud, her voice clipped. She picked up another cranberry. Squeezed it. It popped. She flinched almost imperceptibly. I am excellent at following instructions. Reading a recipe is not the same as. I have read 37 recipes. I have cross-referenced them for consistency. I have created a spreadsheet. I stared at the back of her head. You made a spreadsheet. For cranberry sauce. She thinks I'm insane. She's going to leave me for someone who knows what simmer means without looking it up. I looked it up. 3 times. I pressed a kiss to the space between her shoulder blades, right through the soft cashmere. I think that's the most attractive thing anyone has ever done for me. She turned in my arms so fast I nearly lost my balance. Her silver eyes searched my face, looking for the joke, the sarcasm, the defense mechanism I had worn like armor for so long. There was none. You're strange, she said quietly. You're one to talk. I reached up and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. You bought me 6 croissants because you were worried I wasn't eating enough. 7. I bought 7. 1 was for the driver. The driver didn't want it. I ate it in the car. While crying. She doesn't know about the crying. I know about the crying, I whispered. Her eyes widened. I didn't. You weren't touching me. How could you? You mutter in your sleep. I grinned. Apparently, your subconscious is very chatty about baked goods. The look on her face was absolutely priceless. Somewhere between mortified and violated and something else, something softer, something that looked almost like relief. She knows. She knows everything. And she's still here. In my kitchen. No, she's wearing her own sweatpants. But she's in my kitchen. Making fun of my cranberry spreadsheet. I am going to die. Right here. Of happiness. That's a thing that can happen, right? Cardiac arrest from joy? Note to self. Research later. Sloan. I cupped her face in my hands, forcing her to look at me. Breathe. I am breathing. You're hyperventilating. I am respiring. That's not a verb. It is now. I laughed, a real laugh. The kind that used to feel impossible, the kind that still surprised me every time it escaped. Sloane's eyes softened, the storm clouds clearing into something that looked like sunrise. I want to record that sound. I want to bottle it. I want to carry it in my pocket so I can listen to it during board meetings when people are being stupid. She laughed at me, and I want to hear it forever. My chest ached, the good kind of ache, the kind that meant I was feeling something real. Teach me, I said softly. Teach you what? How to cook. For real. Not from a spreadsheet. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she took my hand slowly, deliberately, as if asking permission even though she already had it, and led me to the stove. 3 hours later, the penthouse smelled like cinnamon, nutmeg, and something slightly charred that we were both pretending not to notice. Sloan had flour on her cheek. I had no idea how it got there. She had been supervising, which meant standing behind me with her arms around my waist, her chin hooked over my shoulder, offering commentary that ranged from helpful. The recipe says, gradually, Alara, not catastrophically, to deeply distracting. Your neck smells good. The cranberry sauce had turned out perfectly. The mashed potatoes were lumpy but edible. The turkey was the turkey was finished. It's dry. It's so dry. It's sawdust. I have served her sawdust. She's going to divorce me. Can you divorce someone over turkey? Probably. I should have done the beef. She likes beef. Why didn't I do beef? Because turkey is traditional. Traditional for whom? The Pilgrims? They didn't have spreadsheets. Sloan. I turned in her arms and pressed my flour-dusted hand against her chest, right over her racing heart. The turkey is fine. It is not fine. It's fine. It is aggressively not fine. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed her. Just a quick one, a brush of lips against lips. But she made a sound, a small, helpless sound, and her arms tightened around my waist like she was afraid I might disappear. She kissed me. In the kitchen. With flour on her face. She looks ridiculous. She looks beautiful. She looks like... Like what? I whispered against her mouth. Like home. My breath caught. The word hung between us, heavy and warm, and so true it made my eyes sting. I love you, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Before I could armor them with sarcasm or bury them under deflection. Just 3 words. Simple. Terrifying. Sloan went completely still. She didn't mean that. She's caught up in the moment. The flour fumes. The cranberry success. She doesn't, she can't. I meant it. I held her gaze, refusing to look away. I love you, Sloan Blackwood. I love your spreadsheets and your panic attacks and the way you bought me 6 croissants because you were worried. I love the way you look at my neck. I love the way you say my name like it's something precious. I love... She kissed me. Not the careful, restrained kisses from before. Not the just the cheek don't push her kisses from the wedding. This was something else entirely. This was hungry. This was finally. Her hands slid into my hair, tilting my head back, and she kissed me like she had been wanting to do it for 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of watching her feed stray cats in the alley behind her father's estate. 2 years of memorizing the way she smiled at her brother. 2 years of wanting and waiting and telling myself I didn't deserve. I pulled back just enough to breathe. You deserve everything. Her forehead pressed against mine. Her breath was shaky, uneven. Her scent, cedar and rain and something sweeter, something relieved, wrapped around me like a blanket. I love you too, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. I've loved you since. I know. I stroked my thumb along her jaw. I heard you. Remember? You heard me. You heard every pathetic, desperate thought. And you stayed anyway. I stayed because of them, I said softly. Not despite them. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall soft, silent flakes drifting past the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights blurred behind the white. The penthouse smelled like cinnamon and burnt turkey and us. Sloan pulled me closer, burying her face in my hair. I still think the turkey is dry, she muttered. I laughed against her chest. Then we'll order pizza. That is not traditional. Neither is falling in love with your arranged wife, because you can hear her panicking about croissants. She was quiet for a moment. Then, fair point. We stood there as the snow accumulated on the glass, as the city hummed below us, as the last light of the afternoon faded into evening. The static in my head was quiet, not silent, never silent, but soft. A gentle hum of contentment. She loves me. She actually loves me. I should tell her about the island. No, too soon. She might think I'm proposing. I'm not proposing. Yet? Wait, yet? Did I just think yet? Sloan, you absolute disaster. Yet, I repeated, grinning into her sweater. I heard that. Shut up. Make me. She kissed me again. And for the first time in my life, the silence inside my head, the cold, lonely silence I had grown up with, was something I didn't miss at all. Merry almost Christmas, Alara. Happy Thanksgiving, Sloan. We're going to need a bigger turkey. The end.